It helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, Ray Nagin came to town recently, but it wasn't like in the old mayoral days. This time, he was the subject of a deposition. We'll look tonight at what we learned from the former mayor. On the business side, we'll examine the state of the oil industry, as well as a new housing concept called co-living spaces, and a possible property swap between the city and the port. In politics, more wrangling from the legislature and the latest on the monuments. Swapping information for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Gordon Russell, managing editor for Investigations, The New Orleans Advocate. Kathy Finn, freelance business journalist. And Kurt Sprang, reporter and anchor, WGNO-TV, Channel 26. We're going to go over to Gordon first, and let's talk about the former mayor's visit, Ray Nagin, who, of course, is now serving time in a federal prison. But he came back for
a deposition in a civil case, a civil racketeering case. It's an unusual case. It sort of resembles a criminal case, but it's a civil case seeking major penalties, and it's one landfill company suing another landfill company, saying that they were sort of cheated out of a bunch of pretty lucrative business after Hurricane Katrina created an enormous amount of debris. And Ray Nagin's role in this case is that the premise of the case is that the owners of the one landfill, which is River Birch Landfill on the West Bank, the owners, Fred Hebe and Jim Ward, are accused of bribing Ray Nagin and other public officials in order to get most of the business steered their way. And one of the people that the plaintiffs, which is Waste Management, claim, one of the people that is said to have taken bribes is Ray Nagin. So he was brought here to answer those questions about that. It lasted about 5 hours. And I guess it was a typical Ray Nagin, kind of vintage Ray Nagin performance. I don't know if it was helpful to either side. His memory seemed to be fuzzy on a lot of things. Notably, he forgot the date that Hurricane Katrina struck. He thought it was August 25th. I think that's a date that most of us who were here will always remember. It was August 29th, in case anybody's forgotten. He more importantly, maybe he forgot what the purpose of this landfill, this competitor landfill that he allowed to open, he forgot what the point of it was, which was to take debris from all the houses that we were demolishing at the time. He thought it was just to put debris and trees and things like that. And so and I don't think this was because he was lying, although someone might read it and think he was lying, but I thought it was more that he has a habit of seeming to forget things, and then he answers things to the best of his recollection, often incorrectly.
So this was a deposition, as you said. Now this is for a civil case, but a couple of questions here. He is in a federal prison serving time, not for anything regarding this case.
None of the bribery charges involving him had anything to do with this case.
Okay, so he was in a Texas prison. Why was he brought to New Orleans and brought to a New Orleans federal courtroom to have this deposition held?
So it's a very unusual proceeding, and the both sides got permission to take this deposition, and they tried to do it at the prison, and they say they weren't allowed access to him, so they got the judge to order the Bureau of Prisons to bring him here, and it's not something that happens very often. And he's 2.5 years into this 10-year prison sentence, and we didn't get to view the deposition. We got a copy of it afterwards, but we did get to see him come into the courtroom, which was kept closed, and he was, in sort of street clothes, but he was in ankle shackles, and it was a strange thing to see, sort of a sad thing to see.
How about other people that were part of that case who are in Nagin's world, who got in trouble or went to jail? What happened to all the rest of them?
I think everybody at this point is out of prison except for him. Greg Meffert was released from prison recently, I think in the last couple of months, and I believe he's living in Texas now. Frank Fradella, who was a major figure in that case, he's been out and he's actually got into new trouble that we've written about recently. I think everybody else who was Rodney Williams, I think, has finished he was the engineer who bribed Ray Nagin. I think everybody else is out of prison and presumably trying to put their lives back together.
But once again, that's got nothing to do with the landfills, which is why he was here in this deposition. So you did see him. This was a man who was the mayor of New Orleans and during a really important time in our history, right after Hurricane Katrina. And you describe it, when you read the article, describe our mayor being in ankle chains.
Yeah.
What was the impact of that?
I mean, I found it very sad, and he looked, I mean, you could only see him from behind, but he was just sort of hunched over and shuffling and seemed sort of broken. I mean, if you read the deposition, and I talked to people who were there, they said he was like his old self and sort of reasonably high spirits and, didn't seem hopeless. He answered questions forcefully and that sort of thing.
So this case then, this civil case, it's Waste Management suing
is the
River
plaintiff,
Birch.
and they're suing River Birch. Yeah.
So what's happening with that case? Because overall, the players in that case, I mean, there's so many more repercussions regarding the federal charges that ultimately were dismissed, and the commenting scandal, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But what's going to happen with the civil case? When does that?
So the civil case is set for trial in August. It's possible that it'll be settled or something will happen before then, or it could be delayed again. But they're taking depositions of Ray Nagin and other players. They may depose Ray Nagin again. They're deposing people like the landfill owners and some of the other people who were involved in some of these scandals. And it's set for trial, I think, in late August, right around the Katrina anniversary, I think, as it happens.
Right. Well, that should be an interesting one to listen to if it does indeed go to court. Okay, Gordon, thanks a lot. We're going to go over to Kurt right now. And something that is continuing, but it doesn't have much longer to go, is this regular session of the legislature, and is anything being accomplished? We have a financial crisis. Is it at all being settled?
Well, I think that the House has passed its budget, and the Senate's going to get its look at it. And I think probably one of the highest profile things that come out of the House, certainly in the past few days, is what's going to happen with the TOPS program, because this is a program that is funded for, I want to say, $208 million, but it needs $290-something million. And so they're $80-something million away from balancing the books on TOPS. And this is the scholarship program, if you're probably aware of that. If you get good grades, or depending on who you talk to, whether that's considered good grades, you get to go, you get scholarship money to attend a state of university in Louisiana. Well, what they're trying to do to rein in the TOPS expenses is they're going to say, and this is a program that has faced cuts in the past, and they say that for the future, moving forward, they're going to have to raise the GPA that you have to get to qualify. And it's right now at 2.5, and they want to raise it to a 2.75, which isn't that much higher. I mean, it's a little bit higher, but... And
they're not touching the ACT. It's
no, right now, it's just, from what I'm understanding, at least coming out of the House right now, and this was, by the way, this passed, but by the narrowest of votes. And so it moves to the Senate next, but it's a 2.75 GPA, and they expect that, I mean, even the rosiest of projections would be that this would cut $7.5 million because of the 50+ thousand students who qualify. About 1,800 would no longer qualify with this increase in the GPA. So they still have tens of millions of dollars that they need to fund TOPS, and it looks like it's going to come from healthcare, which is, I mean, what are the two big things that always get cut? Education and healthcare. And since this is one of the players in that, then it's going to take from the other one.
So this approach then to funding TOPS is an effort to fully fund TOPS, because in this past year it was what, a 60-40
right, there was
split?
a cut.
Or no, 100 for the first.
Spring, mostly.
For the
spring semester
overall, I believe. Yeah, it was 100% and then 40%.
Yeah.
When you talk about education, healthcare always being cut, people need to understand it's not because the legislature doesn't like education or healthcare. It's the only option they have.
Everything else is protected.
Yeah, everything else is protected. So the only way they can go are those two areas.
Right. And
TOPS is really popular and sort of a middle class entitlement at this point, and healthcare is more of a entitlement for the poor. I mean, I think that's, this legislature, I think, is looking at it that way.
Well, and if you look at the criticisms or the people who support raising this minimum GPA, and by the way, this wouldn't take effect immediately. This would be I think it takes effect for kids graduating from high school in the 2020-21 school year and thereafter, so it wouldn't be next year or anything like that. But the people who support it say, look, we want to reward excellence, and a 2.5 isn't really excellence. So let's move it up a little bit. But then people who are against moving this say, look, the people who are going to get hurt, and in this case around 1,800 students, those are the students who need it most.
So if this does not pass, let's say this doesn't pass, does the payout go back to what it was this past year, 100% for one semester and then 40% for the next?
As I understand it, while there may be a lot of negotiating still to be done between the House and the Senate on what happens in this session, what's going to happen to TOPS, as I understand it, is pretty uniform between both houses, and there's more agreement there than there are on other issues.
Okay, and still, we have a budget issue, a budget problem, and they're saying definitely, the House Speaker, I think just last night said, night before last, said definitely looking like a special session. Yeah. So I guess that's what we can expect.
That's kind of the way it goes. And by the way, real quickly, also the proposal, Troy Carter's proposal to increase the minimum wage in the state didn't get out of committee. That's the second legislative session in a row, I believe, that didn't get out of committee.
But still, about a couple of weeks left to the legislative session.
A lot can happen.
Okay, all right, going over to Kathy now. Oil industry, definitely not having its best days.
No, it's not in a good time, and it doesn't look like it's going to change its status very, very soon. The oil prices, of course, have been depressed for some time now, and for several years, and it's not getting any better. The news item here is that OPEC did declare yesterday that they would continue to hold back on production somewhat over the next 9 months. That's an extension of a commitment they had already made. And it's really OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, that controls the prices. It is a cartel, and their production cuts are what determine what oil is going to cost, in the next coming months. So they're giving it a little bit of support by continuing to hold production back, but people aren't really very excited about that. The industry isn't very excited, and they don't put a lot of hope in the idea that that's going to help a lot. And a lot of them were looking for a longer commitment than just into next spring. They were hoping for maybe a few years or something like that, and they did not get that. But of course, what's going on here is the politics of it just do not favor lower prices at the moment, because ever since in the last decade, U.S. production has come up so strongly through the shale oil plays all across the country. And our production now equals that of Saudi Arabia. And so the upshot is, when Saudi Arabia decides to let prices come up a little bit, they're helping the U.S., and they no longer want to do that. So now it's a standoff, and it's a question of how long can they keep production down and still maintain their own style of living, because oil feeds their budget, and they have an enormous budget for spending it in Saudi Arabia and other OPEC countries. So it's a question of who can stand it longer, and our industry definitely is feeling the pressure. You feel it here in Louisiana. Yeah. The service industry in particular, as we always say, this is where the service companies are for the offshore oil industry. A big indicator of that has been Tidewater Incorporated, one of the oldest companies in New Orleans, and the largest service boat company in the world. And they've been through many ups and downs over the decades of the ups and downs in the oil industry, but this one has really stung them. And the downturn has really hurt them. They have begun a bankruptcy filing for reorganization, which is, that's the lowest they've gone. And so this is not good. Their stock price has plunged to nearly nothing. And it's a really bad situation for them.
That was really the pioneering company in offshore oil development.
It was. I mean, they really kind of built the offshore oil service boat business, and that whole Laborde family, in fact, they were innovators in that whole area, and they're no longer directly involved in the company. But So, and that's not the only one. I mean, there have been, along with Tidewater, many other smaller service businesses have really suffered in Louisiana. And if you go south of New Orleans into Houma and down in Thibodaux area, you see a lot of closed businesses and a lot of difficulties. So there's no indication that this is going to get very much better anytime soon, because with oil prices hovering somewhere near $50 a barrel, that's not enough to bring the industry back in a big way. I mean, there's still offshore drilling going on, but there are maybe half as many rigs operating as there were a couple of years ago.
And primarily our industry is offshore drilling.
It is primarily, yeah. I mean, we have the natural gas shale business in North Louisiana and elsewhere, but the price of natural gas has been down so low for so long that business is pretty quiet right now as well. So we don't have a lot of prospects for a big uptick in the industry anytime soon. And until prices get, closer to $60 a barrel and sustained at that level for some time, the industry is not going to go back in a big way into the Gulf of Mexico.
I remember a few years ago talking to an attorney from Shreveport and asking him, well, what's the biggest industry in Shreveport these days? And perhaps a little bit facetiously, but he said Haynesville. He says, we're making our money off of Haynesville. Now I don't think they make money off of Haynesville now either. So,
definitely not.
And so you can see if that's true, then that drags down Shreveport as well.
Of course, the good news for big oil, and that involves Louisiana as well, is that the downstream business, there's an upstream and a downstream, and all of these companies that have big refining businesses are profiting now because the price of oil is their feedstock is so low that their margins are much fatter, and so they're some of the profits in the refining business are offsetting that, what they're losing on the upside. Okay. But and many of them are also involved in the petrochemical business, and that's been booming.
Okay. All right, Kathy, thanks. We're going to go over to Gordon now, and there's talk of a land swap going on between the city and the Port of New Orleans.
Yeah, so this would be a really big deal potentially, and we're still trying to sort of ferret out all the details, but we had a story in yesterday's paper about this. That or the day before, that the Public Belt Railroad and the port would take over the Public Belt Railroad, and in exchange the Public Belt is owned by the city, and in exchange the port would give the city the ownership to the last two kind of remaining working wharves in the lower French Quarter and Marigny. So it's the Governor Nichols Wharf and the Esplanade Wharf. And that would potentially give, depending on what happened there, you could have sort of an unbroken stretch of open riverfront all the way from around Poydras Street all the way down to where Crescent Park ends in the Bywater, which is like a 2-mile stretch. So it would, connect sort of where the Moonwalk ends, could be connected eventually to Crescent Park.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of questions about this still. Like, we don't know anything about whether there's other terms, other things that would have to be swapped. There's a tenant at the wharf right now, which is an issue, and I don't know. This could be something where it becomes a park in many years. We don't really know. There could be other development plans. Either nobody's actually said officially that this would become a park.
Now, the Public Belt serves the port and other industry, and the city had been exploring perhaps selling it or privatizing it, some of which the port was wary about.
Right. I mean, the upside, the port, I think, would be excited about a proposition like this because they've been very nervous about this. The city's been exploring privatizing the railroad and as a way of ginning up some money for the city. And while that might be good for the city, the port worries that would come at the expense of all the port businesses that depend on the railroad.
Do we have any idea how far along these talks are going, or are we just sort of hearing it in the wind right now?
Well, we got the sense that something was pretty close to happening, and I'm not sure if something's been knocked off track. Nobody's told us that it has, but I think maybe that this is a complicated deal, and maybe there's still a few things to iron out. I haven't been told exactly what the sticking points are, but it seems like this is the way the wind is blowing anyway.
Okay, so it's a story that we will continue to find out more about.
Yes.
Okay, Gordon, thanks a lot. Over to Kurt right now, and something that's been with us for the past, 2 years now is monument removal. Supported by some, really strongly opposed by others. Whatever your position, the monuments are gone. They've all been taken down, 4 Confederate-era monuments. So what's the next step now in this story?
I think that right now they're two basic perspectives. You can look forward and say, what's going to happen next with the monuments? And you can look back and say, how much did it cost to take them down? And I think that there are a lot of people who are wanting to know what it costs to take them down. Councilwoman Stacey Head is among them. And if you've ever seen Stacey Head run a budget committee meeting at City Council, she keeps a really close watch on every penny.
She's a stickler, yeah.
She is not going to treat this any differently. But, you know, initially we had the mayor's office said that there would be a donation of $170,000 that would pay for this, and then we had the bidding process that went sideways a couple times, and to this day we don't know exactly who handled the removal, and the mayor's office has conceded that what was initially going to be just a work job turned into a huge security issue when you've got workers showing up wearing bulletproof vests and helmets.
Masks.
Yeah, you've got certainly some city employees on the job, and you've got city employees in the form of police officers there because there was giant security perimeters put up. So it looks like $170,000 was way below what this was going to cost. And the mayor said early on, right out of the process, that any difference would be made up with donations. And that's, I think, the money that Stacey Head and others want to find out about.
Well, wasn't there some talk about it going up to $600,000 even before the first one came down? So the estimate took a significant leap over time,
too. A big leap, and I think that's part of the accounting that everybody wants to see. Because let's face it, if there are city employees involved, it's hard to get around the fact that public money, at least for now, unless there's some sort of reimbursement issue here, public money now went into this. And early on, we were told there wouldn't be any public money.
I think they're conceding that the police and so forth will be paid for with public money. They haven't quite put a figure on that, but they gave us an estimate last week of like $60,000. But that, I think, is considered to be normal city expenditures, and it's the contractors and whatnot that would be paid from this private money that's been routed through a nonprofit.
And so what happens then with the monuments in the future? City said that they were going to be putting out an RFP.
Yep.
Lieutenant Governor Nungesser apparently had a talk with the mayor and came out saying the mayor's pretty firm in his opinions right now. Send an RFP, even to the state.
Look, the monuments that were public nuisances are also probably going to be pretty valuable. And I think the city recognizes that and wants to see who would like to put them up. The city wants to know where they're going to be put up. They cannot be put up on public property
in Orleans
Parish. But they'd like to see how they're going to be put up, in what context, and you can bet that there's probably going to be some sort of a lease or some sort of an agreement that goes into place to get these monuments for whatever use somebody would have.
We should note, while the monuments have come down, Mayor Landrieu's stature nationally might have come up a little bit, certainly in national media, because in the speech that he gave last Friday while Robert E. Lee's statue was coming down, national media has jumped on it saying, wow, what a wonderful speech, and even, putting his name out there for future national positions.
It was a very good speech. The mayor did not take any questions from reporters, though. Well, we sure would have liked had he done that. Let's face it, his profile is very high right now. And you know what? His profile was high back at the DNC convention when they were nominating Hillary Clinton to be their candidate for president. His name was coming up there as a future high-profile politician.
I think there's, when you look at the national media thing, I think there's really example of two different perspectives. The national media see this as a civil rights issue. They see Civil War, civil rights issue, and they're responding to that. And in that sense, I mean, they're very supportive of the mayor. People locally, who grew up in New Orleans, don't see this as a civil rights issue. They see this as a landscape, the background in my community, part of our lives here. And by the way, did anybody ask our opinion? So there's two different perspectives. And you can't say one's wrong over the other depending on what they are. I mean, locals, don't see this as a civil rights thing.
Well, there's some locals, obviously some locals did. I mean, there were those who really supported these monuments coming down. So, all right, well, still, they're gone. We know that in terms of public view, so we'll see what's going to be happening with them in the future. Thanks, Kurt. Okay, something that could be happening here, a concept called co-living. What exactly does that mean?
Sounds odd, doesn't it? It is rather new. This is a concept that architect Marcel Wisnia is his name, architect and developer, is proposing along St. Charles Avenue in the Warehouse District. And it involves a couple of existing buildings and a large parking lot that would be, a new building would be built on that lot. And the idea is to bring smaller units rather than one-bedroom apartments, for instance. These would be individual units that would have a single bedroom and a bathroom per individual, and then there would be shared spaces among, say, 3 to 6 roommates in a suite who would have shared kitchen, shared living, dining area. And they would pay a single fee for their monthly rent, which would include all the utilities and the shared space.
And something that jumped out at me also, toilet paper. They'd get their
toilet paper. There would be a cleaning service once a week for the common spaces.
College.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and interestingly, the closest thing that I know about that's like this in Louisiana are some units that were built in Baton Rouge for student housing in the last few years, and they're the same thing. It's like individual bedroom and a bathroom, private bedroom and bathroom, and then you have shared space with several roommates, and then you have maybe a cleaning service. But of course, it's a bit more basic than these things are.
Right. I can remember dorms sort of being like that. So is this underway now? And
No.
also, we should say the focus is also for service industry folks.
The focus is on service industry employees downtown. No, this has not started yet. It is a proposal, and they are in the process of submitting, I think, documents to the city or to appropriate agencies. But what they have in mind is to seek probably a payment in lieu of taxes arrangement with the city eventually.
And so the idea is to provide cheaper spaces to live, lesser rent, lower rent.
They're really
that's closer to work.
They're targeting the hospitality industry, and it's very close to the new New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute that's being developed.
Okay, we'll see if this gets underway. It's an interesting concept. It is going on in New York. It has been going on for a while.
It has spread
there.
here from New York, San Francisco, and Boston.
Right. All right, Kathy, thanks. Time to look ahead, guys. Errol.
Well, the tragedy in Manchester during the week has put emphasis that the LSU Public Health Facility, the Department of Psychiatry, has been developing a center for terrorism in terms of advising families for resilience during tragic situations, and they're trying to develop something on the national level as an informational base when these sort of things happen.
Okay, Gordon?
Well, going back to Mayor Landrieu and the monuments, I was going to just add that, I mean, this is not an endorsement, but it's going to be interesting to watch. The mayor seems to have gotten a much bigger presence on the national stage with this speech. He's been sort of been the subject of fawning articles in the New York Times, the Atlantic, and so forth. And it'll be interesting to see if he's really thinking about running for president and if we're going to see him try to really make a name for himself.
Okay, Kathy.
It's that time of the year. Hurricane season begins June 1, and they're predicting that perhaps more active season than we have seen in recent years. Let's hope that's a wrong prediction.
Wrong. That's definitely not news we want to hear. Kurt.
Come eat oysters in a month without an R. The Oyster Fest is June 3rd and 4th, Waldenburg Park. WGNO is a sponsor. Live music, lots of oysters. It'll be a great time.
Oysters always good. Yeah. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next week for Informed Sources. Have a good Memorial Day weekend. Good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.